Fearscape Paranormal Podcast, part of the Fearscape Media Network. Prepare to be spooked. New episodes every Wednesday on all major podcast platforms. Find out more at fearscapepodcast.com.
Fearscape Media Network, exploring the unknown, one podcast at a time.
What's up, all you loyal fan? This is Crimshaw Snooker with another episode of Wishful Drinking and Binge Thinking. What's up? I decided to get as absolutely hypocritical as possible. So this month we're talking about addiction. That's right. You're listening to a podcast with a drunk as hell host talking about not doing drugs and alcohol and whatnot. You're welcome. This week, I finished off the rest of that effing black cherry vodka with a little bit of Sprite, and I have moved on to the very last bottle that my neighbor gave me before she moved. It is a very questionable Halloween wine. It is supposedly apple, nutmeg, and cinnamon flavor. There was no name on this, by the way. The bottle of wine just said Halloween. So, happy fall, everyone. It's a questionable age and a questionable blend. But that's what I got going on right now. Anywho, let's talk topic. The addiction. Ooh, it's one of those things that people can. There's a lot of stigma that comes along with addiction. And there are people who are afraid that they're addicted to things when they may not be. And then there are addicts who absolutely refuse to believe that they have a problem because they think it's not that bad. This is a whole spectrum right here. And the DSM, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual that the American Psychological Association puts together, has some criteria for what is actually constituting addiction. And those are broken down into some categories like impaired control, social problems, risky use, and physical dependence. And yes, there is a difference between dependence and addiction. And I'll get into that shit later. But first, let's talk about the categories that I just mentioned. So you got impaired control, which is using a lot more than you intended. And a lot of people do this a lot of the time. But it's just one criteria. You got to meet like a handful of these to really be in addiction. But just using a lot more than you intended to use when you started. And then also wanting to cut down or stop using, but not being able to. Like, if you actually lose control about what you put in your body, it starts to become an issue. Then you got the social problems, which are like neglecting your responsibilities. You know, at home, at school, at work, you can't complete tasks that you're supposed to do. You give up activities that you used to care about because you're too busy using whatever you're using. You just kind of neglect your responsibilities in your relationships. And then you got risky use, which is using in risky settings, like going to trap houses and whatnot. You know what I'm talking about. We're not just talking about alcohol use here, okay? We're talking about heroin and meth and fucking spice, like all the things. What else is risky use? Continuing to use despite knowing problems. Like, if you have a health issue and you keep using, yeah, you're gonna have some problems because you're not really in control of what's going on. And then you got physical dependence. Like, you need more and more and more of a substance to reach the same level of high. That's why they call it chasing the dragon, you know. That's like a dumb phrase somebody created, but like it's colloquial for physical dependence. And then also under that physical dependence umbrella, you've got having withdrawal symptoms whenever you're not using that substance. Now, technically, you don't have like withdrawal symptoms that, like, an insurance company isn't often going to cover you going to rehab because you're coming off weed, because there aren't technically any withdrawal symptoms. But fuck it, there are, man. Like shitty sleep, loss of wanting to eat, and things like that. Like, every drug causes something in your body and you will withdraw from it. It's just some of them don't cause a bunch of problems. So insurance does cover pretty much all the time when you come off of alcohol and benzodiazepines, because you can have seizures coming off of those bitches. And then they usually cover opiates too, because it feels like the worst flu you've ever had. Like, it's, I mean, probably not COVID level hospital on a respirator type shit, but it feels like having a really shitty version of the flu when you're coming off opiates. I've seen so many people. Actually, I've gotten some people into treatment, and the whole time I'm doing their intake interview, they're like throwing up in a trash can. Yeah, it's that bad. There's some pretty bad side effects when you come off of it and don't get it in your body. Like, coming off of alcohol, man. You ever seen people with DTs where their hands are shaking and they just can, like, if you gave them a pen, they'd look like Michael J. Fox or something? Shit, dude. Like, it can be rough. So, why do some people get addicted to substances and some people don't? There are so many fucking answers to that question. There are a ridiculous amount of factors that go into this. Like, for example, if somebody's got a history of trauma or some shit, like, that makes them more likely to use. I don't know if there's a study showing that, but I will say that for every client that I had who was an addict, oh shit, if I had to throw a percentage on it, I'd say like 70% of them had a trauma history. Like, there were, I know correlation doesn't equal causation, but that was a shit ton of correlation, yeah. So I mostly had a ton of people using to deal with their trauma, but then you had the handful of people who, like, they were just party people and they got in too deep. Or there were people who, like, just, I don't know, they just tried it and got into it, and, like, there was no real reason for it. And then, like, what I saw a lot of, honestly, were the people who were prescribed pain meds for a legitimate thing, but then got dependent on those and then started overusing those. And they couldn't get prescribed more because they shouldn't have been overusing them in the first place. So then they switched from opiates to heroin and other shit that was readily available. So there were also people who got fucked, honestly, and they were, like, completely taken off pain meds without being tapered because, like, their doctor lost their license or they were told they didn't need them and they weren't stepped down like they should have been. and they turned to whatever means necessary because they were dependent and needed it to feel like their body could function. So yeah, there are a lot of reasons that people become addicts. And one of the things I told most of them is like, it might not be your fault that you're addicted to something, but it is your responsibility once you are. And it sucks. It's kind of like saying, "Oh, it's not your fault you were born on this earth, but you still got to make it a good place," or whatever. That's a shit example. I'm fucking, you guys know I'm drunk. But the point is, it doesn't matter how it happens to you. It matters what you do once you realize it's an issue and that you need to do something about it. Mind's blown. They should be. Not your fault, but it is your responsibility. Take some goddamn power back, you bitches. So, what do you do once you feel like you're ready to admit that you have a problem? Like, are you done hanging out in trap houses and losing all your money and family and friends and just like, I don't know, panhandling to get a few bucks to give your dealer? Like, you done with that? Cool. So what are your options? You've got a handful and none are better than the other. Like, there are people that look down on people for doing other options for sobriety. Like, why are you looking down on someone if shit's working for them? Don't be that guy. Don't be that asshole. Find something that works for you and just do it. Like, not the same thing works for everyone. Duh. We're not cookie cutter people, dipshits. So what are your options? Obviously, there's the AA crowd or the NA crowd or whatever the fuck you want to go to meetings about. You can talk about your higher power and how that helps you, and just meet with other people that have the same problem and support each other and have like an accountability buddy. Accountability buddies are fucking awesome. It just makes sense with everything. Like, studies have shown that people who try to quit smoking are more successful if they've got an accountability buddy. Like, in weight loss, you're more successful if you got an accountability buddy. That's why AA and NA is so popular, and that's why it works for so many people, because you have other people supporting you, and that shit makes all the difference in the world. And then you've got like the responses to AA and NA, like those people that are like, I don't believe in a higher power. I can't do this. I don't agree with that. Oh, well, I have a hard time finding anyone that doesn't agree with the Serenity Prayer, which is, what is it? I used to say this every morning with all my clients. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference, just for today. Anyway, that's something I think everyone can agree on. But the whole higher power thing, the whole God grant me to the serenity. Yeah, a lot of people have an issue with that. So people look into alternative groups to attend. And if you're looking for other groups, you've got Smart Recovery, which is a good option. You ever heard of SMART goals? That's like a mnemonic that it's an anagram, one of those things. The word that means like all the words, the first letter of each anagram. Yep. Nope. I don't know. Specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, timely. That's a SMART goal. It's where you set goals for yourself and you work toward attaining them. So Smart Recovery is kind of a group setting that uses that as its core foundation. So it's a little bit like the logical man's approach to sobriety. A little bit. And then you've got Refuge Recovery, which is like a Buddhism-based community gathering. And it's all about using meditation and, trying to figure out what your suffering is and how to eliminate that suffering by no longer depending on the things that you're addicted to, like, I don't know, the things that make you feel anything other than your baseline self. And, like, that's, I don't know, I think it's something that resonates with a lot of people, because I had a good chunk of people who wanted to use the 12-step approach, but they were just, agnostic or atheist, or just really they couldn't wrap their mindset around that whole higher power concept. But what they did resonate with is trying to better themselves by practicing acceptance and just alleviating their own neurotic suffering. And that's like a big Buddhist tenet or whatever. So refuge recovery, those meetings are a little more rare, but if you find a good one, they give you that same sense of community that AA does and that Smart Recovery does, but you also get the added benefit of like meditation and all kinds of anxiety reducing things that are beneficial in the whole recovery process. So these are just like 3 examples of community-based recovery tactics. She said as she gulped another mouthful of wine. Weird wine, but I kind of like it. It's got a little bit of cinnamon apple-iness to it. And it's fall now. Fall came rushing in last week like, what's up, bitches? I'm here. Oh, it's cold now. Woo. So that was fun. Anyway, back on topic. So those are like community-based recovery shits. But what about other options? I mean, obviously you've got just plain old abstinence with nothing else. But this isn't fucking Catholic school. I'm not here to just educate you on abstinence only. If it were as easy as just stopping drinking or doing drugs, then you would just stop drinking and doing drugs. Am I right? That's right. So, like, there's a little thing out there called medication-assisted treatment, aka MAT. M-A-T. And that encompasses, like the things that have such a stigma against them, like methadone and Suboxone and Vivitrol. And these things I have actually seen help a lot of people. I've seen them hurt a lot of people too, but just like anything else in the world, the product itself is not inherently bad. It's the way people use it that can be good or bad. So, for those people that get on methadone and use as much of it as they absolutely can and use it to zonk themselves out and get fucked up, yeah, they're being shitty little assholes ruining it for everyone else. But for as many of those people as there are out there, there are just as many people who use it to slowly taper themselves off of everything until they reach their normal point. And they put in the work and do the therapy and everything else they need to do in addition to it. Oh my God, I didn't explain what the fuck methadone is first. So methadone is a synthetic opiate, and what it does is it goes into your brain after you ingest it, and it sits on the receptors in your brain that usually house the opiates that you use. So this is like for oxycodone, heroin addicts, things like that. All the opiates. So it sits on those receptors and it makes you feel not sick. like you're not withdrawing from those opiates. But it usually doesn't give you that high feeling unless you take more of it than your body needs. And there are plenty of people out there who will pretend like they're not getting enough, and they will be prescribed more than they need. And they are abusing the program. And fuck those people who try to ruin it for everyone else. You're the worst. But the people that actually use it for its intended purpose, they will get on a dose that matches whatever they were using. And once they feel like they can function, they can work on something called tapering, where they slowly reduce the amount that they are taking until they get to the point where they're hardly taking anything, and then they get off of it completely. This just gets your body to a point where you're not experiencing withdrawal symptoms. So these are people who are totally dependent on whatever they're taking and just need their body to physically stop feeling sick so they can overpower their addiction. Now, medication-assisted treatment in every study ever done has shown the best results when it's coupled with counseling or community meetings like the Smart Recovery, Refuge Recovery, or AANA. Did I ever say what the fuck those were? It's Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous. In case you're just totally unfamiliar with the concept of addiction, but I feel like that's in pop culture enough for everyone to know, you know what I mean? Like, not everyone's gonna know what you mean when you say, I'm a friend of Bill W., but they will know what you mean if you say, I went to an AA meeting. Okay, where the fuck was I? I get sidetracked so goddamn easily. Yes, so medication-assisted treatment. Good for the people who use it properly. For the people that misuse it, you're just fucking your life up even more, man. Take a step back and evaluate your decisions if you have the mental capacity to do so at this point in your life. Let's see. Then you've got Suboxone. Suboxone's cool. It's basically the same thing as methadone. It sits on the receptors in your brain. They're called mu receptors, like the Greek letter mu. And that's what opiates attach to in your brain, so it's the same thing they attach to. But the cool thing with Suboxone is that it has a ceiling effect. So, like, with methadone, you can go up to like 120 milligrams at any clinic. Although most people generally probably don't need more than 60 to 80 or so. And people that aren't super addicted, they only need like, I don't know, 30, 40, whatever. Everybody's body is different. Their metabolism is different. And the point is, like, some people can abuse it very easily. So the fact that Suboxone has a ceiling effect is actually pretty bitchin'. So I think your body tops out at Suboxone at 32 milligrams, which they come in like 8 milligram strips, I think. So 8, 16. So you take like 4 of those, and that's all your body can handle. So even if you take like 6 strips, which would be way more than 32 milligrams. I can't do math right now. 32. 48 milligrams. If you took 48 milligrams, your body would absorb 32 of those milligrams, and the other 16, it would be like, fuck you, I don't need you, and just like excrete it. So that's pretty cool. Basically, you can't inadvertently get high on Suboxone, which you could do with methadone. So... Yay, that's like a step in the right direction, huh? Why doesn't everyone take it? I don't know. People's body react differently to shit. I've had people who could not take Suboxone. Like, they had horrible side effects, so they had to go back to methadone even though they genuinely didn't want to be on it. Oh, and then you've got Vivitrol. Vivitrol is a monthly shot that you can get that works for alcohol and opiates. So that's cool as shit. I don't know why it's not more widespread. I think because insurance doesn't pay for it as much as methadone and Suboxone, but I think it's slowly gaining a little traction. Anyway, it's cool as hell. Get a shot and not have to worry about anything for a month and feeling like you don't need your alcohol or opiates and not feeling those detox symptoms. And oh shit, that's cool as hell. And why isn't this more widespread? I don't know. Fuck. Probably should be. There's such a stigma with medication assisted treatment, and not just from people who don't have addiction, but like from people in the addiction community who did it without, like, gained sobriety without medication assisted treatment. Like, there are people out there who just attended AA meetings and stopped using, and they were like, oh, everyone should be able to do that. So they look down on anybody that uses methadone, Suboxone, or Vivitrol. And they're like, oh, you should be able to do it without it. But, like, bitch, not everybody's working with the same tools and tactics and everything, you know? Everybody's body's different. So stop judging. I don't understand why there's such a stigma against it. That's like trying to tell somebody that has depression that they shouldn't take Lexapro or any shit like that. They should just eat more leafy greens because that'll increase their magnesium and zinc and some shit. I don't know natural stuff, but you know what I'm trying to say. So, like, quit being dickheads. You know, if somebody's trying to get sober, let them use whatever tools they need to use to make that happen. Because, like, I've seen people do medication-assisted treatment. I've seen people go to a handful of AA meetings and just stop using. I've seen people go to therapy and not even attend meetings and just stop using. Like, everybody's got different levels and everybody's at a different starting point. Like, why are we comparing and contrasting here? This is such an individual thing for all people. And I don't know. Addiction gets a lot of hate. It's just as much of an issue as depression or anxiety or ADHD. It's in the DSM for a reason. It's psychological, it's neurological, it's physical. There's ICD-10 codes for it and everything. Like, it's not something that someone can totally control. If they could control it, they would just stop, right? So, let's try to be as supportive as we can. I mean, it's not our issue that we're dealing with. It's someone else's. Unless whoever's listening has an addiction, good for you. Keep going. Give it your best. But if it's not your issue, then quit trying to project any of your feelings onto it or what you think they should be doing. They know better than you what they need. Whether or not they follow through with it is up to them. But they know better than you what they need. Do they need absolute abstinence? Okay, cool. Try to support them doing that. Do they need therapy? Fuck, help them find a provider. Do they need community? Find meetings for them, no matter what kind of meetings they are. I'm not telling you to, they should do that themselves. Don't do it for them. If you're having your own issues, go to Al-Anon. That's a good resource to help you draw some boundaries and whatnot. If they just need to stop getting their body to depend on a substance, let them do medication assisted treatment. There's no problems with it. It's not a bad thing. There shouldn't be a stigma on it, but there is for absolutely no reason. But, I mean, like, you know why medication-assisted treatment is cool? Because if you take methadone or Suboxone or Vivitrol, and then you go home and try to use anything, like, your mu receptors are already covered up by that methadone, Suboxone, or Vivitrol. anything you put in your body is just going to bounce off those receptors on your brain. You're not going to absorb it. You're not going to feel anything more than, like, you're not going to feel anything. It's pointless. And when people realize it's pointless, they stop using and just keep using their synthetic opiates until they can taper off of them and not use anything at all. That's why medication-assisted treatment is cool. Science, bitches. It's awesome. Quit trying to judge people for using science. Science. It's fun to say. And also fun to observe. Science. Anyway, I guess what I'm trying to say with this episode is that, it doesn't matter how you become addicted to anything. You can be an asshole that just likes to drink, or you could be a kid that was on the streets since you were 12 and the only way you could survive is by going from trap house to trap house. Whatever your story is, it doesn't matter how you got there. What matters is that now you have an addiction and you have to deal with it. Even though it's not your fault, it's your responsibility if you want to get better. So, what I'm saying is the method of your sobriety does not matter. You can do one of these things. You can do a handful of these things. You can't do all of these things because, you can't do methadone and Suboxone and Vivitrol at the same time. You fucking kill yourself. But pick some things that work. Whether you just want to do counseling, or you just want to do medication-assisted treatment, or you just want to do meetings. Doesn't matter. Studies show you're more successful if you do all of those things. But the point is, just do what works for you. It's nobody else's battle but your own, so why give a shit what anyone else says about any of it? Fuck them all. Fuck the stigma. Do what works for you. And I think as we progress as a society, that whole stigma thing is becoming less and less. So hopefully we'll see much more acceptance in the future of all these things. So, whatever the case, do your thing. Make it work. You have no one to impress but yourself. And if you're putting too much stock in what other people say, then maybe you need to reevaluate whose opinion really matters. So, to be as hypocritical as absolutely possible, I am going to raise my glass to all the addicts out there searching for a little bit of sobriety. Cheers! And that was the last of the weird wine. So, to recap, all methods of gaining sobriety are legitimate methods of gaining sobriety. Whether or not all you people think that medication assisted isn't real sobriety, fuck you. Just do whatever works for you to help you get to the point where you are functioning in your daily life without neglecting your work, your school, your relationships, your family. Get to the point where you can function as a real human being again. And that's all it takes. Who gives a shit how you get there? Pick whatever method works best for you. And if you feel like you might have a problem and haven't admitted it yet, think about those criteria I said at the beginning. No, it's not about those college girls that binge drink until they throw up once every 3 or 4 months. That's problematic, absolutely, but it's not quite addiction. It is binge drinking, but that's not quite addiction. It's definitely a road to it, though, so watch yourselves. Try to eliminate any stigma you have for people with addiction. It's rough shit. And like I said, I really talked to every person that came through my doors. And I said that 70% of them probably had trauma coming in, but the reality is it was probably more like 100%. So even if somebody didn't have some very obvious specific trauma that caused their addiction or that made them start using or that exacerbated their addiction, like chances are, even if you're a party girl that got addicted, like some shit happened along the way that probably scarred you a little bit. So everybody's got some issues, and just be mindful of that. Addicts aren't just assholes. They're people who got trapped in this dependence. And it sucks. It really sucks not being able to be in control of yourself. So just wish them luck, and if you can, if they listen to you, point them in the direction of help. And if they don't listen to you, don't worry. It's not your fault. They just can't listen to you right now. So yeah, addiction sucks for everyone involved. And the person has to really want to put in the work and effort to make those changes. If you're not an addict, but you know one, all you can do is make those suggestions and try to help where you can. But you have to make your own boundaries too and take care of yourself and make sure that they aren't totally depleting you. To be honest, sometimes you just got to cut them totally out. I know I worked with some people who had been sober a handful of years. Specifically, for example, I knew a guy who had been sober about 7 years, and he said that he was in and out of rehab all the time for years, and he did not get sober until his family stopped helping him. They stopped bringing him cigarettes when he was in rehab. They stopped talking to him. They just stopped everything, just totally cut him out. And it wasn't until they did that he actually had to take advantage of halfway houses and other people that were offering help. And that's when he got sober. So sometimes the best thing you can do for an addict is to totally cut them out. So you just need to figure out where your person is on their scale, whether they need support or whether the way you support them is by cutting them out. But that's another thing that you can learn in Al-Anon, which is, once again, a great resource for someone who's dealing with a person in addiction. So, I don't know. Hopefully this was helpful for anyone who was considering their options or who knows someone with an addiction, and it may have given you some insight into what some of their options could be. So that's my September podcast. Thanks for dropping in, and have a good fall. Peace out. Fearscape Media Network and all that junk. Bye.